My name's Kat and I'm the in-house photographer at PICHA, based in Cape Town, South Africa. And today we're going to be talking about the bare necessities that you need in your bag as a person who shoots stock, either video or photo. So some people shoot on smartphones and some people shoot on DSLRs. So it just depends which one you have. If you are shooting with a smartphone, then you can take your iPhone or your Android or whatever phone that you have that is a smartphone with a camera, and you just need to make sure that your image quality is the best quality possible. So if you are shooting video, you'll obviously want to be shooting in 4K, and if you're shooting photos, then you want to make sure that your image quality is the best quality that your camera can do. So a lot of the new iPhones and Android and any other brand really of phone has a RAW capability. You just need to look for it. So if you can shoot in RAW on your phone, that obviously gives you more data in the image that when it comes to post-producing your photos or editing your photos, then you can sort of do a little bit more editing on it and it's not going to damage the file as much if you're working on a RAW to start with. So if you do have that capability, definitely use it. It'll just give you a better quality with your images all over. And you don't want to zoom. As soon as you zoom on a phone, it kills the quality. So if you need to get closer to your subject or whatever you're photographing, you physically need to move closer, because that zoom was just, don't do it. So you'll also want to expose correctly on the screen, because again, as soon as you have to edit your exposure in post-production, then you could, and you most likely will, damage the quality of the image. And the more you have to push it, the worse it's going to get. So if you can shoot as close to the right exposure as possible, that's obviously the ideal. So on most phones, you can sort of click on the screen while you're in your camera app, and then you'll see a little box come up, and that's to focus, and then next to the box is a little sun icon. If you push and then you sort of slide up and down, it shows you the exposure changing. So you just want to make sure there that your exposure is right, and that should do the trick. And then hopefully you won't have to do too much editing afterwards. So if you are shooting with a camera, either a mirrorless or a DSLR, then you are not necessarily working with a really expensive camera, and if you are, then awesome, but you don't need a very expensive camera. Basically, go for a decent body, as advanced as you can afford, and really invest your money into good lenses, because that's where the quality will show. So you want to sort of look at the f-stop, the aperture on your lenses. The kit lenses that usually come with the cameras are sort of, they're usually sort of f3.5 to f5.6. And then what that means is when you zoom, it'll change your aperture as you zoom, which isn't ideal because then it changes the amount of light coming into your camera. So those are fine to begin with, but if you want to go a little bit more advanced and you want more control over what you're shooting, then you want to go for a fixed f-stop on your lens. So those usually start at about f2.8, go down to f1.8, 1.4, 1.2, but obviously the lower you go on that f-stop number, the more expensive the lens is going to be, because it's much better quality. So it lets more light in overall, and it'll just help with that quality. But ultimately, when I started, my first lens was a 50mm f1.8. They're super cheap, super affordable, super versatile. And I think I used that alone for like my first 3 years, and I didn't need anything else. So if you can get a 50mm, it sort of, obviously if you're doing portraits and that kind of stuff, it works. If you're doing landscapes, it might not necessarily work. But if you can get a relatively cheap lens and it'll do most of the stuff that you need it to, then it should last you a while, which is great. So what I use the most in my bag is my 24-70, which is an f2.8. And that lens basically stays on my camera 80% of the time. On my stock shoots, actually 100% of the time. I love this lens. It's the one I'm using right now to record on. It's so versatile. It can get wide angles. It can get more close-ups for portraits. So yeah, it's definitely a great lens to have if you have it in your budget. Now, if you're doing video, you want to make sure that on the lens it says VR, which is vibration reduction. And that's obviously going to come in handy with your camera shake when you're taking video. It helps so much. In fact, it is a complete game changer. It makes everything so much easier. So definitely look for that when you are buying a lens. You definitely want it to be VR. Then in terms of lighting, I try and keep my lighting natural light as much as possible. And wherever I can get away with it, the better. Especially because the people that I'm working with aren't usually models. Actually, they hardly ever are models. So if you use a bunch of gear, it's very overwhelming and it's hard to sort of move around and change from one shot to the next. So if you keep it natural, it's so much easier, so much quicker, and your subject doesn't get overwhelmed or bored. So I basically use natural light, and then if I need a little bit more extra light in the shadows, I use one of these 5-in-1 reflectors. And those are the ones where it's gold, white, black, silver, and then inside it's got like a scrim, which is like a piece of thin fabric which you can sort of block a little bit of light with. If there's too harsh light, you can put it over or next to the person, and then it'll block like 50% of the light so that it's not quite as harsh. So that's very handy to have. So I basically have those in all different sizes. I've got the 1x2 meter, I've got the circular ones, which are sort of like a meter and a half big in diameter. And those come in very, very handy. I just keep those in my car, and wherever I need them, I will pull them out and use them. So those are so handy. And then if you want to get a little bit more advanced, you can use your on-camera flash off camera. All you need is a little trigger that you get that you put on your camera and onto your flash. And then it'll allow you to use your camera off camera, or you can use strobes, but those are definitely more advanced. So we'll go into those in a more advanced video. And what else will you need? You will need reference images. I always go and look for reference images first, just because it helps you and your subject be on the same page. Then at least they know what they're going into, what you're expecting of them, and how to sort of pose and act, and whether it's different expressions. It always just helps, and it helps to put your subject at ease when they do eventually come to shooting. So definitely go into it with one of those and send those to them before the shoot so that they can see them and look through them and get comfortable and familiar with them. So it also helps to keep you on track on the shoot day. So you want to write out a list and then sort of tick it off as you go. I love my list, so it could just be me. But it's very handy to know, okay, we still have 5 more to do or whatever. It just helps keep you on track. So it's a really great thing to have. Then you'll also need your model and perhaps property release form. Most of the time I haven't had to use a property release form, but if you are using a property that is very noticeable, then you may need a property release form as well. But basically, you want to send it to your subject before the shoot so that they know what they're getting themselves into. So when they agree to it, they know exactly what's happening. And I try and take a physical copy with me on the day, because most people don't actually have printers anymore. So they find it difficult to print it out and go and get it, like write it out and then go take it to a shop to go and get it printed and scanned and all the jazz. It's just too much of a mission. And then you end up chasing everyone for your model release forms, and it's just unnecessary stress, especially when you have a certain deadline to reach. So rather just take your prints with you, get them to sign it at the shoot, and then it's done.